and to use it well, and to use it in the way it was intended to be used, not as something to run programs that are put into you by your family, your society, your religion, your politics, or your belief system. Beliefs, we don't deal in beliefs. We're trying to learn how to use our minds without believing. Mm-hmm. Believing is a cheap thing to do with the human brain. The human brain is a marvelous instrument, and it is at the disposal of this higher essential being that you are, a mind that interfaces with our reality through this brain. Have some respect. Don't ask to have everything handed to you. And somebody asked me once, what is the most important thing I've learned from the seas? And, I thought, well, the most important thing I've learned is that I don't have to ask them everything anymore. Mm-hmm. I can think things through on my own. I can figure things out on my own. They have taught me how to think. Mm-hmm. They have deprogrammed me from my illusions. Some of that was very difficult. I had illusions like everybody. I believed the whole, love and light and just think nice thoughts and nothing bad will ever happen to you. Well, the controllers of this world, the powers that be, the hyperdimensional denizens that have designs on your future and your energy would love for you to believe that. Just think nice thoughts. Well, I'm telling you, there's an old Indian story about that, about the mahout and the elephant. The master is telling his disciples, everything is God, God is in everything. It's all God, just become one with everything and one with God. So they go out for a walk in the forest, the master and his disciples, and along comes an elephant handler. He's running and screaming madly. There's a mad elephant on the rampage, mad elephant, get out of the way, get out of the way. So the master and most of the disciples, they all run and climb trees, and this one thinks, well, the elephant won't harm me because all I have to do is remember that the elephant is one with God, I am one with God, the elephant won't. So he stands there, being one with God, and the elephant tramples him, so he's laying there smashed in the path, and the master comes to him and he says, why didn't you get out of the way? And he says, I was being one with God and one with the elephant. And he says, well, the elephant handler, who was one with God, was telling you to get out of the way.
Right, absolutely.
So God has many faces, not all of them pleasant to behold.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's very wise. So what I would love is to find out, or actually have you talk about what the seas are talking about now and what they're saying about the future, and how, what, if anything, they're saying about 2012.
Well, the seas led us through a whole learning process where we learned a great deal about pathology and humanity. We had to actually go through certain experiences before some of the things that they said to us could even be taken on board. For example, one of the things that they say is that there are human-looking beings who do not have souls, as we understand them, as individuated souls, that they are basically animated by the equivalent of an animal soul that goes back into a soul pool, when the body dies. And this, of course, really explains one of the problems that's plagued human beings for millennia, that there are people who are really convinced they have a soul and people who declare that it does not exist. Well, what if they're both right? What if the people who really know that they have a soul and really believe in the existence of the soul are those who have one, and those who simply cannot ever under any circumstances conceive of such a thing or believe in such a thing or see evidence for such a thing or have experiences of consciousness that is not directly connected to a physical body, maybe they're telling the truth. And this is a really big conflict among human beings. So there is a form of this aberration, or this, you can't even call it an aberration, because if that's what is existing on the planet, if there are soul beings and non-soul beings, that's just what is. But there is a defective version of the non-soul being, which is what we have come to know as the psychopath. Our definition of the psychopath is really specific. It's a genetic thing. You're born that way. It's not something that you acquire or get. And it's also not something that necessarily anybody can see from outside behaviors. You may have to interact with an individual for a very long period of time before you come to realize that they have no conscience and that they simply will do everything they do, to further their own ends, and that nobody and no thing else ever turns them from what they want to do, their immediate gratification. And I'm sure everyone has had somebody like that in their life and in their experience. But the bad thing about it is that these kinds of people tend, because of their nature, to rise into positions of power also, just as there are the ordinary garden variety sort that, just live out their lives as parasites on other people. So that was the first thing that we had to learn about.
Right, and those kinds of people are actually tend to mirror behavior that they intuit, or they realize that you want to see, and then they mirror that back. And so, of course, those people rise up in through the ranks, because if an authority figure gets yes all the time and gets what they want, the kind of behavior they want in the person working for them, they're going to promote that person.
And it's not just a question of mirroring, because they're great mimics and mirrors, of course. But the bigger problem actually is the fact that psychopaths took over religion like thousands of years ago, and they began to structure religion so that it would create belief systems that would service their agenda. And, it's our understanding that these soulless beings and psychopaths themselves are the instruments of hyperdimensional beings, i.e., paranormal, i.e. alien. Now, if you've studied the works of John Keel, and I know his book, Operation Trojan Horse, is a little hard to get, but anybody who is interested in the subject of UFOs or aliens really, really needs to read this book, because aliens, so-called aliens, are not a new thing. They are not aliens from outer space, although I'm not excluding the possibility of extraterrestrials. But the UFO alien phenomena, by and large, is a paranormal phenomenon. And if you understand that there are soulless beings in charge of the governments, in charge of religions, in charge of academia, in positions of power, judges, lawyers, doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, school teachers, they have moved in and taken over these positions, that you would be living in a world that is pretty much focused on a materialist way of life. And even if you think about it, they use religion to create a belief in some resurrection of the dead at the end of time, where all the saved people are going to be resurrected to have a physical body. So this actually is a materialist view of the world. Even if you say you're believing in God, who's supposed to be a spirit, or you're believing in Jesus or whoever, there's
an apparent contradiction also in going to heaven,
right.
Even as certain forms of Muslim belief. In
Right.
other words, that you're going to be
that you're going to have
virgins and
and of course, the Jewish religion believes that it's going to be an earthly kingdom, with the Jewish Messiah ruling over the entire world on earth. Mm-hmm. So you've got just variations of the same materialistically created and propagated belief systems. So,
but you're also, and when you say in terms of you've got non-physical beings, hyperdimensional beings, you're also talking about going cross-dimensional. You're going, so it can be termed outer space, because space, going through space, and different planets.
Oh, well, certainly.
Entities from different planets can
Absolutely.
be other dimensional.
I mean, very early in our sessions with the seeds, you know, we were really, you know, taken with the idea of maybe communicating with some aliens. Everybody else was doing it, you know. We want to communicate with some aliens too, you know. So it's like, are you alien? We asked the question, are you alien? And they said, from your perspective. And of course, people immediately jumped on that as saying, oh, they're aliens. And then later on, when they came back and said, we are you in the future, we are you in the future, we are you in the future, you know, people couldn't forget that they had said, we are alien from your perspective. Sure. But that wasn't exactly what they'd said. So,
but at the end, they also say that they were the aliens, right? And they're a different being in essence.
If you read that particular passage and you understand, you know, that they're talking about, you know, that these are different information sources that may not necessarily have anything to do with an actual, you know, extraterrestrial being, as in, you know, something or somebody from another planet. Although other planets, other star systems, we don't know that what we see is exactly how things are. We have scientists and they have instruments and they have telescopes and they say, oh, this galaxy is umpteen zillion light years away. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Maybe that's just a matter of our perception. You know, just like time is a matter of our perception. Maybe it's really right next door, but that dimensional differences are perceived by us as spatial differences. We may say, oh, it's billions of light years away, and it's really in another dimension.
Exactly.
So
that's the same premise
yeah.
with, for example, Venus appearing to be, you know, an inhabitable planet, when in reality it may actually be inhabited in a different dimension. And so we're looking at that through a telescope, seeing a certain dimension.
That's entirely possible because, you know, as anybody who's looked at the matter knows, Venus is hotter than hell. I mean, if there is a hell, that's where it is. I mean, 900 degrees, acid rain falling 24 hours a day, and they don't have 24-hour days, but you know what I mean. I would say it could definitely be that our perception of it from our state of being, you know, we perceive it as 900 degrees and hotter than hell, and maybe in another dimension or density of, and the seas make a distinction between dimensions and densities. Dimensions are lateral and infinite, and densities are vertical and only 7.
Okay.
And density refers as much to state of awareness, you know, because obviously if you're in a higher density, you're more aware of the multiple dimensions on the density below you, you know, and as you go up, you know, this just increases, because we as human beings are extraordinarily aware of, you know, many creatures inhabiting the animal kingdom and the world around us, the natural world and so forth. So we're aware of many dimensions below us. And we'd have to say that these higher dimensional or higher density beings have the same perspective on us that we have on, and that's kind of a scary thought, especially if you realize that they may not have your best interest at heart, and just as the farmer has a lot of awareness of the many dimensions of his herd of cows, he knows them very well because he knows which ones he's going to butcher to have put in his freezer.
Right. And this is where we get into, I mean, you obviously also got into the, what you call the Lizzies, but we're talking about Dracos or reptilian beings. Mm-hmm. Through, you have had interaction with them, I assume, through the seas, or at least...
Well, I don't know that we've had interaction with them. We've certainly acquired some information because, you know, you read these things, people, you know, I have people under hypnosis, they're telling me they're having interactions with reptilian beings. If you take them into a, you know, a hypnotic regression of an alien abduction experience, and they're telling me about getting raped by a reptoid, well, you know, I'm hearing these stories, and I'm asking these questions, and I'm going through all of this, you know, so I mean, I'm going to ask the seeds about them. And we did adopt very early on this term Lizzies. I think that was from Barbara Marciniak, which we thought was just such a handy term because it kind of diminished the terror. Because if you really think about it, it's really kind of a terrifying thing to think that there are creatures that apparently, according to the best information we've collected,